This video is brought to you by Yesoul.
Hi friends, in this video I shoot a production using an anamorphic lens at my favorite focal length for the first time, and the results are absolutely mixed. They're sort of mixed. But before we get into the review, I want to first call out my amazing sweater that my wife, Danae, got me for my birthday. Let's see, can you see that? Do I have to? Oh, this is awkward. Check out my awesome sweater that Danae made me. It pretty much says everything you need to know about me. And I know that many of my fellow introverts out there will appreciate it. And if you too would like to wish me a happy 43rd birthday, please do so in the comments. I would not be opposed to that. Now, as you guys know, I absolutely am in love with panoramic ratios, aspect ratios. In particular, I'm enamored with the Hasselblad Xpan side-by-side 35mm aspect ratio, which is a 65:24 aspect ratio. In fact, I've been working on a long-term project for years, photographing rural landscapes and architecture using that aspect ratio. And I will be publishing a book soon, hopefully in the months to come, specifically with rural decay in mind, using that aspect ratio. So please stay tuned for more on that. But because of my love for wide aspect ratios, I've been wanting to produce some video content using an anamorphic lens for a long time now. That 2.4 to 1 aspect ratio that you can get after de-squeezing using one of these guys. I've been wanting to try that. So I was extremely excited when SIRUI, and yes, that is verifiably how you pronounce this company. It's SIRUI, not SIRUI or whatever else people say. SIRUI sent me this 24mm 2.8 anamorphic lens for Fuji X, and I immediately began shooting a new project with it. As you may know, on my other channel I create immersive content featuring mainly mountain bikes, custom builds, restoration projects, and I've been wanting to try to film one of those builds using an anamorphic lens for a while. So I had an opportunity to restore a slightly older and under-spec'd mountain bike for a young student athlete on the high school mountain bike team that I coach for, and I decided to shoot that project using the SIRUI lens exclusively. But before I get into the results of the production, I want to talk a bit about the experience of shooting with this lens. Of course, the price point makes this extremely enticing, with most anamorphic Cine lenses being prohibitively expensive for us small-time content creation types. So this represents an important entry point into anamorphic. So if the quality of this lens is right, the low price point, low respectively I guess, or comparatively, it certainly is. The build quality of the lens feels excellent to me. It's got really good heft. It's nice and metallic. It's not weather sealed, but it does seem like it's tough and resilient. I like the feel of the aperture and focus rings, nice and damped. All in all, it feels high quality, and there's nothing that gets in the way of the usability as far as handling goes. It's good, feels good. So that's all well and good, but what we're truly interested in here is the image quality, of course. Will this lens create the magical cinema experience that we're expecting from a panoramic lens? And that's where things started to fall flat for me as I began diving into this. The first issue for me in this this lens and the type of content that I create anyway, this won't be an issue for all of you, but it will be for those who create the type of content maybe that I do, or are into the details, and that is the close focus distance or the maximum reproduction ratio. Honestly, I had not realized how inhibited I would be by that until I started filming with it. It was I probably wouldn't even have attempted it, but you know, by the time I realized it, I just kind of was too deep into the project and just wanted to see it through. But as it was, I felt constantly like I was bumping up against that minimum focus distance. Since I'm working on a lot of tiny details in my restoration and builds, this was a real problem, and I ended up having to crop in quite a bit. So I think if I really wanted to shoot in an anamorphic style long term, and I wanted to use this lens, probably actually most anamorphic lenses, I would guess, suffer from this, as it's not a major priority for most cinematic film videographers, I would guess. But if I wanted to shoot with a lens like this, I would need to shoot in 6K or 8K so that I could crop in where I needed to. But it didn't end there, the problems. Another thing I noticed, at least on Fuji, was that the focus peaking was deceiving. Now, I have no idea if this is an issue with the lens itself, or if the blame lands with Fuji. Probably Fuji, honestly. I don't think the lens is at fault. But there were many times where the display would highlight edges of things I was filming, giving me that impression or that false sense of security that I was in focus. But then later I would review the footage and I would see that it was in fact clearly not in focus. I learned that I was not able to trust the focus peaking, and rather I needed to punch in to manually verify critical focus. And maybe I should have been doing that anyway, but it does take a bit longer. When you're running gun, you're shooting everything yourself, you're setting up shots yourself, you just need to be quick and efficient. So I guess that was a bummer. But in my 7 or 8 years shooting Fuji, much of that shooting has been manual, and the only other lens that I've seen that with is, that I believe I've seen that with, is a third-party fisheye lens. So maybe there's some similarities there, but I'm curious, of those of you who are watching who have used this lens or other anamorphic or fisheye, have you experienced that sort of focus peaking issue where you felt like, where it showed you it was in focus but then later realized wasn't quite? But anyway, that was my experience. So I learned you just can't really trust that entirely. So as it stands, I have a lot of out of focus shots in my production, and that kind of makes me a sad panda. Next, let's talk about the image rendering. And on this one, I think perhaps my expectations were a bit high. Like when you think of anamorphic, when I think of it, I think of high budget cinema. I think of immersive theater type of experiences. I think of Tyrannosaurus Rexes chasing Jeeps, Death Stars, and dreams being incepted. So perhaps my expectations were dialed up a bit too high, but I was profoundly disappointed that in the image quality. It wasn't magical. It wasn't bad, but there wasn't anything particularly cinematic about it, at least no more than usual. I didn't really get that amazing lens flare I was expecting. I learned after looking into why that you need, you know, specular lights, kind of those laser beam lights straight at the lens to see that those cool blue lens flares happen. So I didn't get any of that, and I was hoping to see some of that. And I should have known better. I know that there isn't such thing as a magical lens, even though a lot of newer photographers or some YouTubers will lead you to believe that there are such things. There are some lenses that create interesting effects, but the only way you get magic in filmmaking and photography for that matter is nailing the combination of intriguing story, believable characters, immersive settings, intentional lighting, superior sound design, and the use of artistic composition. But I guess I expected something a little bit more, I don't know, special about the rendering of the lens, but it was just okay. So nothing really unique other than the aspect ratio, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, the image quality is fine. And although I did love the aspect ratio and I loved composing shots in that wide field of view, the last thing I learned that really was the biggest deal breaker for me, and maybe some of you also, it really has nothing to do with the lens itself, it's just the format and YouTube. I didn't realize that if you upload a video to YouTube in a non-standard ratio, you can't add end cards at the end of your video. And for me, that is literally my livelihood. It's all the little things that I have to do that add up to my ability to make a living and convert and draw traffic and optimize every little thing so that you know, it all adds up. So this was a pretty big disappointment for me, knowing that I wouldn't be able to use anamorphic in any of my videos going forward. So all in all, it was sort of a disappointment. Some of it was my own fault, some of it was SIRUI's, but in the end, I won't be shooting with that lens anymore. And while I can't recommend it to other content creators for the reasons that I've given, it's probably great for more traditional filmmaking types. If you plan to tell more typical cinematic stories or enter film festivals, etc., this lens will probably work great for you. The Yesoul G1 Max exercise bike comes with a 32-inch HD screen with the Yesoul app. Start your training from the comfort of your own home with champion coaches along for the ride, offering hundreds of live and on-demand lessons. This bike is near silent with belt drive and magnetic resistance. It also features 100 manual resistance levels, enabling people of all fitness levels to cycle towards their fitness goals at their own pace. And as a family of mountain bike racers, the thing I like about the Yesoul G1 Max the most is that any of my family members, regardless of fitness level as well as height, can fit on this bike and find the type of training that will stretch them and which they will enjoy the most. We appreciate Yesoul for sponsoring this video and encourage you to check them out in the link below. But that's all for now, friends. As always, thank you for watching and for your support. If you'd like to take a more active interest in my channel, especially here on my birthday, and be able to see my videos in the future early and without any ad interruptions or otherwise, head over to my Patreon and become a member for just $5 a month. In the meantime, remember to do good with your camera, and we will talk to you again real soon.